Hi everyone, I'm Harris Bor, a commissioner with the AI Faith and Civil Society Commission, and we're conducting a series of interviews with leaders in the field of AI on the question of AI and human flourishing. And with me today is Dr. Maya Ackerman. Maya is a pioneer in generative AI. She serves as CEO and co-founder of Wave AI, one of the earliest Gen AI startups. She's also an associate professor at Santa Clara University. She's researched generative AI for text, music, and art since 2014. She's an early advocate for human-centered generative AI, bringing an awareness to the power of AI to profoundly elevate human creativity. She's been named a Woman of Influence by Silicon Valley Business Journal, and she's featured in the media widely and speaks on global stages like the United Nations, Oxford, IBM Research, Microsoft, and Stanford University. Maya, that's a very impressive CV you've got. I don't know how you managed to fit it all in. Tell me a bit more about your background. Now, how did you get into this area of creativity and Gen AI in the first place?
You know, it was an incredible stroke of luck, to be honest. I was studying computer science, doing a PhD in machine learning, foundational machine learning. So we're talking here, spending day in and day out doing mathematical proofs. Okay. I never had any intention to get into a popular area of anything. I just wanted to do something that I find interesting. And so during my PhD, I happened to come across just a phenomenal opera singer in Waterloo where I was studying, and started taking voice lessons from her, and within about 9 months started singing semi-professionally myself. So it was sort of massy machine learning and singing, and then went through a bit of a kind of a crisis of faith about what I want to do in my life in my first year as a professor, and happened to come across a little tiny research field called computational creativity in 2014. And I dropped machine learning in favor of this tiny field of researchers making machines that make music and art and dance choreography that nobody in the world cared about. And so got my footing there in 2014.
I mean, it sounds like there's like two aspects of your character here. On the one hand, you've got this kind of artistic, romantic, emotional side. And then you've got this kind of hardcore, scientific, very rigid, intellectual, rigorous side. Are they in conflict, the two aspects, or no?
I appreciate you asking. I think I'm really more of a humanist fundamentally. I'm an artist humanist, and life took me down a path where I was called to study math, to study computer science. I spent a decade. I have 3 degrees in computer science. I spent very, very math heavy. I sort of spent a decade developing that part of myself. And I think that's I'm very, very grateful. I'm very, very grateful for all the weird twists and turns that my life took that ended up giving really a humanist and an artist such deep insight, some deep, deep, deep knowledge into technology and how it works.
I mean, it's a wonderful thing. It's like you're coming to this from the humanities and a humanitarian side, and that's what you're putting central. You're not saying that actually there's a balance here or some conflict. You're saying, being human is primary, and this is just a way to kind of manifest that and elevate that, to use your words.
Exactly. I think being human is the beginning and the end, and AI should only be used in service of our humanity. And we should ideally not use it in a way that disservices our humanity.
You mentioned that you got into this area, which was not that popular at the time. But I've heard you talk about some of the people who had been working in this area. You mentioned Harold Cohen, an artist, and Amy, I think it is, David Cope's Amy. Do you want to tell me a bit about those explorations?
It's really interesting that some of these early machines were made by artists and musicians. So Harold Cohen made a system called Aaron, which was an automated painter. It was actually a physical machine for a long time. There was these massive robot arms that would draw first on canvas, and only later Aaron was taught how to add color. And Harold Cohen built it with the goal of understanding his own creative process. And he insisted that he was a creative entity. So I find that really important, actually, because sometimes we lose sight of, um, we kind of start thinking that these are separate from us, that these machines are an other, and we start hating them and being afraid of them. But they're made for people by people, right? It doesn't mean that there aren't serious problems, but fundamentally, this is an extension of us.
I first encountered you when I came across your article on humble machines, which I really loved that title. And I wanted to sort of ask you about that in a moment. And then after reading that, I tried out Lyric Studio and Melody Studio, and it all struck a very strong chord. I'm sorry, about the expression, because I felt I understood what you were trying to get at. So just tell us, what is your philosophy behind these apps? What's your thinking?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate this question. Yeah, thanks for checking out my paper and products. So the way that I think about it is based on human collaboration. We all know brilliant people, people that are so good at what they do that they have enormous success in their field. And sometimes we could have the fortune of working with such people in various capacities. And it's not just those people's capabilities, it's also how they choose to behave. They can choose to take center stage. You could try to work with them and they quickly get everything done. They sort of don't make room for you. And I feel that too often the brilliant large models that we have today, those amazing AI systems, do the same thing to us. We're allowed to type in a prompt, but then the machine sort of does whatever it wants, and it's very difficult to interject ourselves. The reason that a lot of use cases of ChatGPT have been so successful, and the reason that my products with a much smaller teams are able to kind of continue to make a splash is because they behave more like sort of a humble, brilliant person who has a capability, but chooses to apply their brilliance to elevate another person. Kind of like a teacher or a guru, right? It's all about the person that they're trying to assist. And there's so many ways to do this, but at the end of the day, it's all about giving the person complete creative control and prioritizing their growth to the point, ideally, that you're not creating dependence on the machine. So the brilliance, the intellect, the capabilities that are being gained will be retained, even if you never access the machine again. Kind of the same way as if you never interact with that brilliant person, if the interaction was really designed to elevate you, then yeah, you'll retain that gain.
Right, except in this situation, you've got the brilliant person there all the time, and you can go back as many times as you want, and they're never going to get fed up with you.
That's right. So there is definitely this kind of cool advantage of automated systems. Obviously, there are a lot of sort of advantages and disadvantages when you compare it to a real human.
Yeah.
But I think even with being able to go back, if there is some kind of measurable improvement in the person, they'll be able to go further even with the machine.
Yes.
They'll be able to go further by themselves, and and that collaboration will get stronger if the person is learning in the process as well.
What's really interesting here is often you find within the debate that some people say, machines shouldn't pretend to be people at all. We shouldn't anthropomorphize them at all. But and other people are saying, treat them as gods and they should do everything. But what you're saying actually is that you are anthropomorphizing them. You say actually they're humble. They're taking a little step back. They're being slightly cautious. They're holding back some of their power and allowing the human being to really move forward. And I think you use the word elevation. They elevate the human in that way. Is that about right?
Yeah, I really like how you put it. They hold back some of their power. I mean, think about human interactions. We constantly hold back our power.
Yes.
And we have to. When interacting with other human beings, you have to hold back your power. If you don't, then there are various psychological titles that become relevant very, very quickly. It's part of interacting with another entity. It's not 100% you. It's a togetherness. And I think, what you bring up about kind of applying these human faces, these human concepts onto machines, of course, it's a very old tradition. We've done this from the beginning of AI in the previous century. And it's really about nuance, I feel. These are brains. AI systems are brains, especially the way we build them now with machine learning methods, literally like neurons connected. They're constructed in some ways based on the human brain. They're not the same as the human brain. I like to think of them as a bit of an alien species. They have some similarity to us, and yet they're very different. So we apply these analogies like humility, sort of with a grain of salt, realizing that it's an approximation, that the humility doesn't come from the same psychological mechanism for a person. Actually, recently, the way I started thinking about it is the reason they differ from us so much is in part because they're not embodied. They don't live in this world, and they don't need to develop the same emotions, the same mechanisms as humans do.
Do you think the way that we think about machines is important in determining how far they will take over our lives? In other words, there's something you said just a moment ago about, we call them humble, but we know they're not quite like human beings. Do you think it's important to educate people in terms of what these machines really are? And do you think it's important in terms of the way that we actually discuss these matters and the narrative that we build around them in terms of how we're going to get on with them in the long term?
I really appreciate this question. It really hits the nail on the head. Yes. What I've noticed happening since about 2023, so for the last couple of years, but it happened very quickly. It happened in the first few months of ChatGPT, and after Stability AI raised 101 million, it's kind of this very, very beginning of the investment world, and then everybody else waking up to Gen AI, is that very quickly the narrative became very narrow. And I think you already alluded to that. You have the people who love AI. AI is God. Everything is good. It's not going to steal our jobs. It's going to create more jobs. And if it steals our jobs, that's okay. This kind of like hyper positive and the kind of cool attitude, but like very naive. And then on the other hand, you have like AI is horrible. It's stealing our jobs. It must die. People who do it are horrible people. Kind of like this other extreme. And you can't seriously get anywhere with this sort of I don't want to say politicized, kind of like
extremism.
Like extremism, exactly. Science fiction-based thinking. It's just not reality. And so for people to understand what these machines are all about, I'm working on a book right now called Creative Machines, precisely to educate people.
We're going to come to that. I'm very excited to hear about that. Yeah. So, one of the, we talk about holding back power. Isn't the temptation, though, just to do whatever we're able to do? Have we ever really been able to hold back as a species? And are machines going to ever be able to hold back? How do we ensure that?
So machines don't make any decisions, right? In a sense of like where they go. Not really. They make like micro decisions in some sense, but they don't decide what to be applied to, right? So that's all humans. But your more fundamental question I think is about, if you don't mind me rephrasing, are humans going to be able to hold back from applying change to everything they possibly can? Can humanity as a whole hold back? Very good question. I really like it.
Well, when you're thinking, let me expand upon that, because I've been talking to quite a few sort of tech people, and they start out with the ideal of human-centered AI. But then when they're pushed a little bit, they'd say, well, this is user-driven. What the user wants to do, we don't want to dictate to people how to use these machines. Whatever the user wants ultimately will dictate how this goes. So, applying this to your AI, for example, if someone wants to have a hit and they don't want to do the hard work themselves, have a hit in the charts, they just, ask your, lyric studio to do the work for them. How does one resist that temptation?
So that's not going to work, first of all.
Okay.
None of these machines can give you, they don't give hits, okay? Even like the more recent, more comprehensive music systems. Right now, if you want to make a hit, you need to be pretty darn good.
Yeah, well, that's really good to hear. Yeah.
We've had hits made with our system, but that's because it was made by brilliant people and the AI was there to support. That's the way Lyric Studio is built. And you can't go to ChatGPT and ask for a an award-winning book. Like it's
Yeah.
just not there, right? And when it comes to the edge of human capabilities, it's also such a social thing. It's such a profoundly social thing. It's not entirely based on the quality of what you create. But even that aside, machines are not there.
Will they ever be there?
You know, I'm not sure that that's really what this technology is geared for. I think that's where I'm struggling a little bit. It has its strengths and its weaknesses. And it's phenomenal at so many things that humans struggle with. It's fast. It explores possibilities that we don't. It can have so many, like you look at Midjourney, it can do it in so many different styles. You can ask some of these models to mix different types of styles. But when it comes to being the best at human art, I know that there's so much fear around it. It's not exactly what it's geared to do. It's not exactly what it's best at. It's the current models, the way that sort of big industry constructs them, are not very good at it because they're too focused on imitation. But if you consider even kind of removing that and building them a little differently, building them the way that we build our models, which is more geared toward creativity than correctness and a lot less imitative, kind of non-imitative on purpose, even then, it doesn't have this kind of insight into the way that humans operate with each other, which would make it possible to find these kind of like top pieces.
I've heard you use these terms like convergence and divergence. And is that what you're getting at in your explanation just now?
Yeah, that's right. Wow. yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of existing systems, not so much the visual systems, but definitely ChatGPT is more convergent.
Yeah.
And to some degree, even the text-to-image models, which are still considered to be profoundly creative, are sort of making a lot of convergent changes because what they chose to be important is that when it gives you a piece of art, you can say, yes, that's art, and that's called typicality.
Yeah. So convergence it centers around the idea of truth. You get a right answer. And divergence is more open-ended, creative, right?
Yeah, and then the search space becomes so ginormous if you really kind of move away from typicality into the world of infinite new possibilities.
Yeah.
That you need some insight into human society and to really find the next hit, right? Because I think what's hard for us to appreciate sometimes is just how enormous the space of possibilities is when it comes to genuinely new things.
Yeah.
And it's not the AI's job to shape humanity, okay? It's not its job to find our next cool style, to create award-winning songs for us. We're a society of humans, right? It's also, by the way, not its job to interfere in our relationships or raise our children for us, right? Like what?
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes we go too far with where to put AI.
Okay. On that last point, are there areas that you think that AI should not go? I mean, you've touched upon them. I'd like to clarify that if you would. You mentioned raising children or having relationships. Do you think AI should not be used for that?
Yeah, of course. We get, like, sometimes I feel like there's this narrative that humanity is broken and we need AI to come rescue us. It's amazing that at the same time we can be like, this is horrible and it's going to destroy our lives. And at the same time, there's another narrative saying, this is the best thing, we need to build it as quickly as possible because we're so broken.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely false. Humanity has evolved over just this, I mean, technically millions of years if you consider, where we kind of originate from. And the fundamental things about life, human connection, food and shelter, right? I'm starting with human connection because that's the one we struggle with the most nowadays. And AI is not designed, it's not inherently capable of replacing it, even of assisting with it. It's not its job. Facebook is advertising for a little while, advertised to a woman who's been married for 18 years, happily married. They were advertising an AI boyfriend for me. Mm-hmm. It's pathetic. If you look at what Tinder without sophisticated AI, what these companies intentionally did to a generation of young people. some things are more important than technology. And I say to somebody who loves and dedicates her life to AI, it's not the all and be all. We need a sense of balance. And some places it just has no place. It's projecting.
When people use the language of, we need AI to fix us and we're broken, do you think there's an argument to be made that we kind of need to get our own act together, understand what being human is and what our qualities are, in order to use this stuff properly? Or else there's a danger in going wrong. In other words, if we think that we need AI to help us with relationships rather than focusing on relationships, is there something going wrong there? And should we be fixing ourselves as part of the process of using AI?
I think fixing ourselves is everything. Fixing ourselves is the all and be all. And in some ways, AI gives opportunities in this regard. And in some ways, it presents risks. I live in the US, right? It's a hustle, bustle, quickly, constantly, the message is you're not good enough, you're not productive enough, do more, give more.
Mm-hmm.
We need somehow in this chaos to just slow down and make time for what's important. Not AI, not money, none of this kind of external stuff can address the human condition. It can touch our deepest needs.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some interesting opportunities with AI about when it comes to the chords of humanity. It just kind of requires a different lens. It can make us more intelligent, more creative if directed through the lens of humble creative machines. And I think that's really meaningful. I think that's about AI making us more human. The other aspect, it's one of my favorite topics, is that it can be a mirror for us.
Yes.
To some of our more problematic sides. AI is full of biases, and our reflex is blame the developers, blame the executive, fix the AI. Shannon Beller.
Yes,
I think
exactly.
her perspective is sort of related, but sort of not identical to the way that I look at it. Actually, she used to be at my university. Brilliant woman. So here I look at it as I kind of have this positive spin on this. So we get upset at the AI for having these flaws, but really the idea of a bias-free AI in a world with biased humans is an absurdity.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, who's going to figure out how to create this bias-free world? And it's so tricky. But what's even more important is by looking into the AI, by engaging with it and aiming to understand the biases in it, we get to understand the biases in ourselves. And that's the only way that you overcome the biases, is if you face them. And that's a really powerful way that these machines can help us grow in our humanity.
Wow. So what you're saying is when you see the faults in the machines, we see the faults in ourselves. And therefore it's looking in the mirror, we know what to fix in ourselves.
Precisely.
Right. And if we fix ourselves and the machines reflect us, the machines will be better or not?
Of course, it's a slow process, but I think I just think there's some value in addressing biases in machines, but I think it's more important to use the opportunity to improve humanity, because in the end of the day, it's about humanity, right? Mm-hmm. These machines are secondary. Humanity is primary.
Okay, let me test this idea that we want to, keep the human in the center of this. I mean, there's a lot of discussion, and there's actually law now about keeping, within Europe at least, in the EU, not in the UK, but about keeping humans in the loop when there's AI decision making. Right? There's this notion of keeping humans in the loop, and the question I'd like to ask is that actually practically possible in every situation? And I'm thinking about people who check. Tweets, for example. I think there's 5 million tweets that get reported each day or something like that. And you're going to need an army of people to look at those, and it's going to be impossible for them to get through them all without some AI assistance. So is it really possible to always keep the human in the loop? Aren't we going to have to rely on AI, actually convergent AI, deciding things for us? Rather than this, this utopia that you portray, that AI is going to be humble and step back, take a step back. Aren't we actually going to have to rely on AI to make decisions for us?
A couple of things. First of all, I'm not saying that the vision that I want, I'm not saying that that's where things are exclusively going. I just think that, at least in part, should be integrated into the picture more heavily. We can't control how other people with a lot of resources choose to apply AI, right? So kind of it's important to not, to sort of not fall into a super naive camp. It's more like, I guess, prescriptive than descriptive. I feel like that's where we should try to go much more intensely than we're going right now. The other part, and a lot of European laws and some American conversation tries to micromanage human-machine interactions, and tries to sort of, there are some copyright laws where you have to kind of promise, guarantee that you, mostly the human did it and the AI just assisted, kind of like that we're supposed to have this really great introspection into what the AI does and what we do. That's not realistic. And I mean this sort of very respectfully to all of these organizations. I think it's important to realize that in most contexts, it's not realistic. Because humans, even when we work with each other, we're not very good at knowing how much we contributed.
Yeah.
So if you look at a group of people and you ask them what percent they contributed to a project, it adds up to more than 100, pretty much most of the time. And so it's just, you can't have this level of control. You can't request that a human, make decisions at every step. It doesn't even make any sense. The machine makes millions of decisions very, very quickly, little micro decisions, some of which might turn out to be more important than others. It's just like a human brain. And it makes it very hard to regulate. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate the frustration and the challenges. Our societies are not designed for it. Our legal systems are not designed for it. But imagining the solutions that are just impossible are going to work is not going to.
I mean, what's the alternative? Having no laws, or are you just saying, well, I'll leave that to the lawyers to work out?
No. I just feel like the laws need the people making the laws need to understand how the technology works. For example, there's a lot of focus right now on controlling what data companies use. There's a lot of very, very good reasons for that. But that's very hard to accomplish in practice, right? It's a very difficult uphill battle that companies are fighting each other. And a lot of creators are passionate about it. And I really get it. I get it. Like you say, don't use my data without my permission. I 100% understand the sentiment. But from a practical standpoint, there's a lot of practical barriers to that. And that's why it's so difficult to accomplish. But when it comes to telling a company, don't imitate my style without my permission, you can do that. And for example, OpenAI sort of backpedaled when they tried to use Scarlett Johansson's voice without her. They got somebody who sounded like her, not using her data, but still violating her rights, right? So it's kind of like we have laws for humans based on what we do, not based on the data that goes inside our brain. Nobody tells me how to think, but I'm not allowed to do like a million things are illegal, right? And that's how it should be. Don't apply your brain to do illegal things. So it should be the same with machines, right? Like, there are things that are easier to regulate that for some reason there isn't as much emphasis on. So it's about understanding, not about kind of giving up. Yeah.
You talk about creating AI that elevates humans. And I just, as someone who's, is a business person, what's the investor appetite to sort of follow that kind of line? In other words, is that something that investors care about? What's the business case for that?
For elevating humans?
Yeah. In other words, rather than just making something that's most powerful, for example, what's the business case for making something that helps people?
Investors are finally starting to understand that. What's the most successful product in generative AI? It's ChatGPT. Why is it so successful? Because it was aligned to interact with us.
But does it elevate us, do you think?
In some ways, yes. Yeah, it depends how you use it. A lot of the use cases really do elevate us. I think the reason it's successful is because it elevates us. Ask anybody who heavily uses it. Usually there's a back and forth. Usually if they use it for writing, they don't just say, oh, write me an essay about, I don't know, sunshine on a rainy day or something.
Yes.
It's not a one-click interaction, right? They probably take an essay, edit it, ask you to adjust something. It's a back and forth, and it's an iteration. And I believe that if you use it profoundly enough, you actually become a better writer by interacting with ChatGPT. If you use it deeply, which a lot of people do. A lot of people use ChatGPT in profound ways, right? And I believe that that's the heart of its success, that it does provide this human-centered experience for the users who seek that. And investors, you watch investors now appreciate that. Humans are smart. We're a smart species. We can tell if something is elevating us or stealing the rug from under us. Yes. And we generally like to be elevated. So actually, this replacive, aggressive attitude is not as financially successful as investors initially anticipated.
But isn't the hope, and maybe I've got this completely wrong, isn't the hope that the aim ultimately is to have bots that you don't need so many interactions with to get to the point you want to get to? You just ask them once and they just know instinctively, yes, I know Maya, I know exactly what she wants, here you go, here it is. Isn't that really the ultimate goal?
Humans are not like that. I had a conversation with a very successful entrepreneur early in my entrepreneurial journey, and he shared with me and my co-founder that when they made apps that were really easy to use, there was no retention. Mm-hmm. And so they actually had their first success when they finally made something that's engaging, where the human is forced to give of themselves. Mm-hmm. We don't like things that are too easy. We don't. We like to engage. We like to give of ourselves. We like the exploration. And I'm not saying that you just kind of dumb down the AI on purpose. It's very, very difficult to give the person exactly what they want. I don't even know what I want when I get started.
Yeah.
I'm doing the exploration together with the AI.
Okay.
And that's so beautiful.
So don't dumb the AI down on purpose, but you have enough faith in the human spirit that there'll always be something for us, because actually that's just built into the system.
And then look at us. Yeah. We used to be happy if we have a meal and a roof over our heads. Yeah. Nothing is ever enough for us.
Yeah.
There's be any limits to what we want and what we're capable of and our curiosity. Humans are a fascinating species.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that's very clear. Now, let me ask this other question. Now, what about the role of non-technical people, of what we call civil society, in the development of AI and the legislation of AI? Do you see a place for that, given everything you've said about
I think that we need the general public to be more educated on this topic.
Yeah.
Because right now, they're being manipulated.
Okay.
A lot of the narratives that are really popular are benefiting somebody. Even the whole thing about data, don't use my data, there are organizations that benefit from it. I mean, think about it. If a company licenses a data set of 1 million books or 1 million pieces of art, how much they would have to pay in order to thoroughly compensate every creator in that data set. So what happens most of the time is that that agency that owns the copyright to everything makes money, and the creators see nothing. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of this narrative about data is being controlled by companies that own rights to data, the collectors, the aggregates of creator rights, not creators themselves. And creators are very, very unlikely to see anything from this with the way the current narrative is constructed. There are ways for creators to make money on AI, but not with the current narrative, not with the current thing that's getting pushed.
What are you recommending then in terms of how creators can make money?
For the creators that want to be involved, and I realize that that's probably a minority, right? So I kind of really respect that. Mm-hmm. If you, for example, offer a feature like give me photography in the style of a particular person, if that person actually wants that to happen, their photography style, their music style, their art style to be imitated, there are ways to monetize that. There are ways that startups can work with people who want their style to be monetized, who want their voice to be monetized. Mm-hmm. Grimes put out her voice, an automated version of her voice, and anybody who makes a song with it, she shares half the royalties. There are ways to get involved for people who want to embrace this direction. I don't necessarily promote that everybody should do that, but a lot of the current narrative is built to benefit somebody. I mean, big shock. That's how our world
So
works.
Who should do the educating? If everyone's pushing a narrative, who should be doing the educating?
One thing that I find really stunning, really, really stunning about this movement in AI is how little academics who've been doing it for decades have been sort of, quote unquote, allowed to get involved in the conversation. Mm-hmm. Right? When it comes to innovations in the life sciences, the scientists often have a bigger mic.
Yeah.
And now, because we have some researchers in AI companies, it suddenly became kind of privatized. The loudest mic is on not even the researchers, really the executives of the largest companies. And I do value the perspectives of these executives, I really do. And I think absolutely brilliant stuff is going on in companies. I'm fascinated by it, but their perspective is very specific and very interest focused, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And it's understandable.
So you want more balance?
One more balance, yeah. You need more perspectives of people who've been doing this for decades, who actually are the originators of these machines. There's a computational creativity community, largely in Europe, of people who genuinely understand what this is about, and their perspectives need to be amplified, because there are things that are honestly not difficult to understand that the entire population can know, that would help people have kind of a broader, more accurate understanding of what's happening.
But should the general public also be consulted as well, and in terms of what people really want, in terms of these tools, and what they're willing to accept, and the red lines?
I think that the general public is, it's everything, right? It's the beginning and the end. It's they are, from my kind of limited experience with that, if you ask somebody who, sort of doesn't really understand the space of possibilities, where we should go, sometimes that can be challenging.
Yes.
But people always know, and I think we should be really paying close attention to it. If you give them something, they will tell you if they like it or not.
Yeah.
Right? They will tell you how it's making them feel. They will tell you with their dollars if it gives value to their lives or not. And I think it's not so much, it's sometimes hard to ask the general population where this should be going if they haven't had time to sort of dig into it and understand the space of possibilities. But their emotional response to stuff that does exist, how they interact with machines, I think sometimes industry is slow to respond to that. Yeah. And that's kind of a disgrace, because it's really, all of this should be happening for the general population. Like, who are we building these tools for? Like, so it's, I think they need to be heavily involved. And I think it's good that the general population is being more vocal about this. I think fundamentally that's a very good thing, because it's going to impact all of our lives.
Okay, so since we're talking about education, let me ask you this. In terms of developers, we spoke right at the beginning of our conversation about your very varied background and your music background and this artistic side that you've got. But often people have a very kind of STEM, what we call STEM orientated, scientific orientated background. Particularly in England, people study very focused degrees. In America, often it's broader. Your major and your minor. In this country, for example, people will, who are doing a computer science degree will only study computer science. Do you think there's something to be said then for developers, coders, to have a broader type of education, a humanities education as well, to come to some of the views that you've come to? And do you think that's something that's important or not?
I had a very technical education. I have a degree in combinatorics and optimization and computer science. I sort of took a few other courses on the side. I actually do see the value of a focused education, because you need to become a master of your craft. And I don't think that there's a problem with developers being developers. Yes. Actually, I don't think that the person implementing the AI has to have a broader perspective. That's more on, really. I'm not sure that that's how we solve the problem.
No,
it's at a higher level that the bigger decisions are being made. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Do you think anybody has to have, so obviously someone has to have the perspective that you're having, in terms of keeping the focus on elevating human beings, if you use that as your kind of mantra,
so
who holds that as the ideal then within an organization?
So this is really about the executives.
Yeah,
because it's to some degree, the AI needs to do that as well, right? If you want to do this really well, but it's something that can be communicated to developers. Developers are smart people. They can build machines differently if they're... and also, I feel like technical people, because so many of my life is surrounded by technical people. A decent number of them are, are curious and have an open mind, and it can kind of... they're not so limited that they can't go in this direction.
Yes. Okay, fair enough. I think we've reached the time for you to tell us about your book.
Oh, sure. I've been thinking so much about the big picture and humanity and AI recently. It's been a journey putting together a book that really collides all this information together.
So what's it called again? Let's tell everybody what it's called firstly.
It's called Creative Machines.
Okay.
Machines. It's going to come out in the fall. So I'm really excited about it. You can follow me on LinkedIn to stay in touch. Maya Ackerman. I think that's the best way at the moment.
Okay, do that. So what, do you want to give us a few sentences in terms of what's in this book and why we should be reading it?
It's really a path forward um, on how we can have a thriving humanity in the age of AI. And
Okay.
it's, yeah.
You're not giving too much away at this stage.
Well, it's written in a way I think that's very, very accessible
Yes.
and very, very human. And at the same time, you'll really have a very comprehensive understanding of where this came from, what's going on today, and where we could be going in a way that would profoundly elevate humanity. And also, I think it can sort of indirectly improve your own relationship with AI and help you use it in a way that...
And so am I right in saying that it may undo some of the damage of the narratives that you were talking about and may kind of even out?
Yeah, break out of these really narrow. It's almost like what we did to AI is what we do to politics. It's just like break it down into left and right and a really wacky center that really eliminates most possibilities.
Right, it sounds like an important sort of educational tool for the masses at least. So we have to be reading that, no doubt. I'm going to ask you just one more question. What's the future hold for you? What's the next thing you want to do? I mean, you've created these amazing apps. What's what you're working on now? And what's the next stage?
Well, other than working on the book, I think that's been the focus at the moment. On the other side, on my kind of like building part of my life, exploring several possibilities that I'm unfortunately not yet able to share.
Okay, we'll have to just keep an eye out then for you and follow you indeed on LinkedIn and other places. Maya, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I know that you're incredibly busy and we're really honored. Thank you so much.
This was an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
That was quite an interview. What stands out for me is Maya's background. She has the humanities and she has the sciences, a deep knowledge of computer science and AI in particular. And the thing that she said, which I find so powerful, is that actually she is a human being first, and AI comes to elevate the human, not to fix all of our problems. And I think that's really the key takeaway for me. The other thing I really liked is the fact that she said that this conversation needs to include everybody. Everyone's going to have something to add to this conversation and something to say. What is it that we want? What is it that we're willing to tolerate? Where are our red lines? So let's continue to find the people we want to talk to and try and work out how we can use AI to better ourselves.